안녕하세요. Oh, oh, I see. Oh, okay. I see myself in my own glasses, in my own reflection. Uh, okay. I don't want to take off my glasses because I'm going through video. I'm doing a video and I don't have any makeup on or anything, so I put my anti-rad glasses on. Well, anyways, um, I hope you're hanging in there. I hope you're doing fine. In the past few weeks that we're doing our online classes. Um, for today's lesson, we are actually going to be talking about social, cultural, and political changes. Now, I know that you've heard of the term generation gap, right? So today, we're not actually going to focus more on generation gap, but we are going to be talking about how society and culture changes along time and how what is the role and later on in your assessment is how does politics play a major role in social change, right? So I've prepared a couple of articles and videos for you guys um, to ponder on later on. So let's start with the discussion.
Good day! 안녕하세요. Ohayo gozaimasu. Konnichiwa, konbanwa. We are going to have another discussion today on social, cultural, and political change. Now, later on, I am going to be removing myself, or I'm not going to show myself in the video because I am going to be cheating. I am going to read I am so sorry. I'm going to be reading my discussion, but don't you worry, guys. I am a frustrated DJ, and I hope I can say it well. So here we goes. This is the discussion on social, cultural, and political change. So, one of the prominent theorists of all time is Charles Darwin, and he is a one of the most respected theories, especially when it comes to evolution. And according to him, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. So what did Charles Darwin mean? It actually meant a famous line coined by Herbert Spencer, meaning survival of the fittest. Societies will experience stages of development, and that those that can survive are the strongest, while the weak will perish. And so there was a term there. We have the term adaptation. Now I'm going to emphasize the term adaptation. Okay. Why? Because oftentimes students would confuse it with another term, adoptation, with an ADO instead of an ADA. Now, it's ADA when if you write ADO adoptation in our essays later on, then I will be really marking it wrong because adaptation and adoptation or adoption are two different terms. Whereas adaptation is the process by which organisms cope with environmental forces and stresses. So, though according to Charles Darwin and Herbert Spencer, according to them, those who can survive are not actually those who are smart or strong, but those who are actually be able to adapt better. Now, we had a discussion on evolution a while back, and there was a question there, or I don't know if I asked I don't remember if I actually asked the question. But why do you think, according to the video, Neanderthals had a bigger brain than the Homo sapiens sapien? But why did the Neanderthals die out and not the Homo sapiens sapien, which is us? Now, the process of adaptation is actually one of the reasons why. So instead, the Neanderthals were not able to adapt in the environment because they needed, since they had bigger brains and bigger bodies, they needed more meat or more food in them. But their hunting style did not cope up. Whereas in Homo sapiens sapiens, they were able to create effective tools of for hunting. So that's why that is the common theories on why Homo sapiens sapiens lived on and the Homo neanderthals died out. According to Henry Louis Morgan, this is also one of our prominent anthropologist researchers. According to him, in the cultural evolution model in 1877, all cultures pass through various stages of development, although some are stuck in a stage. Okay, so this is the model that he showed here. If you're going to notice, sorry, I got. We have three levels here, levels of understanding. We start with savagery, barbarism, and civilization. Now, if you're going to look at the characteristics that is shown there according to the cultural model, majority of the characteristics are actually based on food. Diba? At first, in the savagery, they were only fruit and not subsistence. So they were eating salads. Salad lang. I'm just actually trying to piece it together, okay? And then they discovered that there are animals. So they had fish and they were able to cook it. They had fire. But then they discovered that there are other big animals and that they can eat other meat. So they created the bow and arrow. Now, because they hunted really well, they needed something that could help them store their game. And so they created the pottery. But they realized that the animals were depleting. The number of animals were depleting, so they have to transfer to another place. And so they decided that if, what if we can reproduce animals? We can reproduce children or humans, so why not animals? So therefore, in the middle barbarism, they were able to domesticate plants and animals. And then they later on created a more sophisticated cooking tools, the iron tools. Now they needed to something to remind them of their recipes, diba? Mga pamana ni Lola. So they created alphabet and writing. Okay, that's just how I piece it together. All right. So, from pieces of evidence gathered by cultural anthropologists over time, they have inferred that cultures have evolved in terms of how people get their food to survive. And why am I seeing spaghetti and fried chicken there? I am hungry again. I'm hungry. I was hungry when I made this, so damay-damay na this. I'm going to pass on the hunger to you guys. Right, so we have the different types of societies that was um, since the beginning, and starting off with hunting or foraging and gathering. Okay, I hope it's big enough sa inyo guys. Okay, so foraging or hunting and gathering is the most basic society. They depend on hunting or fishing and gathering edible plants for survival. Nomadic by nature, very little division of labor, and they only take what the land has to offer. So in the last 100,000 years, societies were 80 to 90% hunters or gatherers. Those that remain nowadays are in danger of extinction because more technologically advanced societies push them to areas that have little to no food. Now, for in pastoralism or pastoral societies, they are engaged largely in herding cows, goats, sheep, mainly for subsistence and transportation. characterized by domestication, the intentional breeding, of specific animals or plants to increase their utility. So starting civilizations near water made domestication possible. So ancient civilizations started near bodies of water. Animals required a large tract of land. This settlement from nomadic life to sedentary is what we call the Neolithic revolution. And I am going to show you the differences between Neolithic revolution and the Paleolithic revolution, Paleolithic period. I'm sorry. So this is the hunting and gathering, and this is where the pastoral society is. Okay, so the Neolithic revolution is actually the shift from the old Stone Age to the new Stone Age. So, according to some literature, foraging and hunting was more of directly attributed to Paleolithic period, and when pastoralism came into the picture, it was more of a Neolithic period now. Okay, so there are there are five, if I remember it right, five aspects of differentiation between Paleo and Neolithic. First, dwelling. Dwelling is home. So in Paleolithic, they had mouths of caves and skin tents, whereas in Neolithic, they had mud bricks supported by timber already. In lifestyle, the Paleolithic were nomadic, so their family size was small. Because, let's just, for example, um, you are from the ancient people are in Manila, but then the next food available is actually in Davao. So that's a really, really long walk and swim, right? And during their time, I think it was still not that um sitang muna, it's still not that separated kaayo in the Pangea. So anyways, so like for example, so you're in Manila and you have to look for food and the next food is in Davao, but you get pregnant. The ancient people got pregnant. Now, since there was no food and there was fatigue and stress, oh, diba? Stress is already present there. I don't know if they call it stress. So, there are two things or three things that may happen. Either the mother and the child survives the walk or the travel. Second, the mother dies, or third, the child dies. So that's why when traveling together, they sometimes they would be in smaller number compared to Neolithic period where they have already sedentary lifestyle. When I say sedentary lifestyle, that means that they have already settled in an area. And since they are already settled, they didn't have to look for food elsewhere because they can already grow it, or they can already hunt, or they can already domesticate animals. Now they had uncontrolled births. So if the woman gets pregnant and gives birth, hala, it's alive. So they got pregnant again. Give birth, it's alive. They got pregnant again. Gave birth. It's alive. So they got pregnant again. They gave birth. Aw, it's alive. So, therefore, there was an increase in population. So, domestication would be possible if people did not settle, would not be set. Sorry, domestication would not be possible if people did not settle in an area. With an increase in population, the division of labor was inevitable. So property, there was no concept of home, but ownership emerged in the Neolithic. And in food, they still hunted and gathered, but they grew crops and domesticated animals in the Neolithic period. Okay. Next society is the horticultural. Don't be confused between pastoralism and horticultural. Pastoralism is the domestication of animals. Horticultural societies is the domestication of plants. So the growing of edible plants. and crops. So created permanent settlements or villages that could have 1,000 or more people living in it, as long as it was sustainable. So very few of the societies remain, planting crops for subsistence and survival. Next is the agricultural. Now, with the division of labor and an increase in population, specialization was inevitable. Now, what is specialization? It is the process of concentrating on and becoming an expert in a subject or skill. Like, for example, what if everybody in your barangay are teachers? That is specialization, di ba? Nag-specialize in yung barangay of teachers. Pero imagine, let's go back to the early societies. What if everyone hunted and gathered? Then it would be the number of game or animals would immediately replete or mahurot, di ba? So in society, when there is already a large number of people in society, division of labor was very much needed. Some had to be farmers. Now, some also had to be those who actually process what the farmers have harvested. Like for example, the farmers processed rice, diba? So the other people will develop the plants, will make the rice, the grains that we know now. Now, since they produce the rice now, some people would have to sell it, or some people would have to cook it. Right? See? So that is division of labor. So agricultural societies, a more efficient and intensive manner of producing food using sophisticated knowledge and technology. So these societies can produce more than what is needed by members. So they are found in areas with large sources of fresh water, and these societies built irrigation systems to bring fresh water to farther parts of the land. So when they were only a small number of people, okay pa that they were near the rivers, but their numbers increased and they were already flooding, or they were already flocking to the riverbanks, and that is not good anymore. So they built irrigation systems. Now, who built the first irrigation system, or what civilization invented the irrigation system? Sige nga, be. If you're going to answer Mesopotamia, then you are partially correct. Truthfully, there is no literature available that will claim that only, again, I highlight only Mesopotamians created irrigation systems. All right. So they had these different civilizations: Mesopotamians, the Chinese, the Egyptians, the Mayans, not the Mayans, the Olmecs, and the Indians. There was no communication during their time, but since they needed it, so they created a solution, and the common solution was they had irrigation systems, different versions of it. Okay, so due to increase in population, also a centralized government was needed to ensure order. And why was visible leadership needed? People were producing surplus products. Oops, sorry. Okay, before we go to surplus products, let me show you guys first this domesticated and the wild crops. Okay, if you see the small corn there at the left side, then that is actually the wild. But when they learned how to domesticate plants, they had muna siya na namang huge corn. And then see, if you see the difference between the wild pig and the domesticated kind. Okay, let's go back to surplus. Sorry. Okay, so by surplus, I mean the goods they produced are produced in excess than what they consume. And people from other places converge now to places that have a stable supply. 'Di ba? Paingon ta dito sa, that's why, um, let's just liken this in the modern world. We say that there is a surplus of opportunities if you go to Manila, if you go to Luzon, Manila, NCR. So that's why people from the provinces would flock to that area. As a result, now Manila is very congested. Okay. And the last two, with agricultural societies being limited, production was highly dependent on human and animal capacity. It paved the way for the development of industrialization. So the invention of the steam engine in 1700 gave birth to this type of society. Machines replaced human labor at certain stages of production. Industrial societies convert raw materials produced in agricultural societies into finished products using machines and in much larger quantities. So the drawback of this type are the dependence on fossil fuels that are harmful to the environment and the creation of unequal income between workers. Because not a lot of workers were needed now because there were machines. And in the post-major economic activity is the post-industrial, or this is the providing services and facilitating the exchange and the use of advanced communication technologies. So how does culture change? Now there are three processes. So along with the change in society, culture changes along with it. We have diffusion, assimilation, and acculturation. So the three general sources of influence that may influence change or the resistance of it. Man, by nature, refuses or resists change. Okay? So first is the forces at work within a society. What is that forces at work? Social tension, social biases, and one of it is politics. So politics, guys, is very, very useful. Dangerous? Sometimes good. Depends on how it is actually used. But man by nature would always want to be on top, or we are egocentric by nature. So politics, people would want to be in power so that they could influence society with, or they could make people follow what he wants. So if you're a Hume's major, we are going to have a more intensive discussion. Oh, we already have the intensive discussion, I'm sorry, about politics. Okay. And next is the contact between societies, of course. We do not have a walled society. This is very much open. We have, if you walk here, Silliman itself, when before the pandemic, is like a melting pot or a salad. You can see a lot of Chinese, a lot of Koreans. There are a bunch of Japanese, a lot of Americans, Filipino American students, and we also have Nigerians here because we are a diverse culture. And of course, the changes in natural environment. Okay, and cultural loss is an inevitable result of old cultural patterns are replaced by new ones. So it cannot be um, we cannot forgo of cultural loss. We cannot keep all of our cultures. Honestly, guys, I am a millennial and mm, I am no longer that familiar with a lot of superstitions. 'Di ba? Superstitions is part of our culture. 'Di ba? The non-material cultures. It is part of our norms. And also, additionally, aside from superstitions, I am a purebred Bisaya, but there are a couple of terms actually in Bisaya that I could no longer understand. Maybe especially because I grew up, most of my time, my parents work here in Siliman, so I grew up in campus Jud, and people were always speaking in English because I know a lot of teachers, a lot of foreign students, right, like that. So um, it's easier for me. Bisaya in general, the Visayans in the Visayas region, it's easier for us actually to shift from Bisaya to English compared to Manileños or Luzon people. Um, Tagalog, oh no, not Luzon people, Mindanao, Davao people. It's easier for them to shift from Bisaya to Tagalog. Okay, so let's now get on with the processes. Cultural diffusion versus cultural assimilation. So the difference, I hope you can read it, guys. I don't want to read it anymore. It's too long. Tukarong tapol. All right. So cultural diffusion by science, it has a similar meaning in science, meaning it is the spread of particles. But in sociology, diffusion is the spread of cultural traits to another culture. So, for example, of cultural diffusion, GOT7, right? Oh, I am a GOT7 fan. Some of you will be BTS, Peace, GOT7, BTS are friends. Right, so K-pop in the world is a cultural diffusion. So it is the spread of influence. But you can still know that it is a Korean. Pizza. It's spread now everywhere, and that there is already um, various versions in different countries. If you go to, I think as the Philippines, we have pizza that is thin crust, pizza that has sardines. Then if you go to Vietnam, they also have the street food where katong rice paper, they grill it, then they put sauce, they put shrimp paste and quail eggs. Yummy. It's very yummy. And they call it, when we ask what's the name, they just tell the tourists it's Vietnamese pizza. Okay, so that is cultural diffusion. But when you say cultural assimilation, in cultural diffusion, it would always result of a culturally diverse society. So more instead of um, describing it as a melting pot, we could use the term. You could use the analogy of a salad. You can mix it all together: the leaf, the olives, what's there, the crotons, the chicken, the Caesar dressing. You can still put it all together in a good in and produce a good salad, but you can still see the different parts of it. But together, it makes a good salad. Whereas if we go to assimilation, the resulting society is um, homogeneous. Okay. To further explain what assimilation is, let's have assimilation versus acculturation. So, okay, acculturation is the partially adopting the culture of the other group, whereas the assimilation is a total adoption of another group's culture. Let's just say, for example, in acculturation, I will go to America, migrate to America, but I would still practice my Filipino culture. They would, from time to time, I would have fiestas, or I would cook the adobo, 'di ba? I would have, ito pa may lang cultural practice that take on. What do they do? Reunion in classes and on. I heard from a foreign friend that the Philippines is the only one that is actually very big. Some countries do it, but only the Philippines is actually very big on reunions. Yeah, that's true. Whereas in assimilation, it's a total adoption of another group's culture. So in other words, if I go to America and I still practice my culture, and then when I give birth, my child would be assimilated to American culture. Everything would be American about him. He may be practicing some Filipino stuff because I told him to do so, but his ways, his thinking, his wisdom, his principles, his practices, the way he speaks, he would not learn how to speak our native language. Everything about him is now American. Now that is assimilation. So I have a diagram here. I am a Filipino, married to a Korean, of course, who lives in Italy. And we live in Italy. O, diba? Korean, Filipino, and we live in Italy. So just imagine the diversity of their cultures. Then you see that little triangle that is involved in all three. That is what we call acculturation. That means that the student or the person was able to adapt to all three cultures, but still maintains the different uniqueness of different parts. But when you say assimilation, a Filipino living in America, living American ways, totally forgetting Filipino culture, that is assimilation. And when you say cultural lag, this is a term by William F. Ogburn, an American psychologist, a sociologist, in his book Social Change with Respect to Culture and Original Nature, published in 1922. So, according to Mr. Ogburn, this refers to the notion that non-material culture takes time to catch up with the material culture. For example, technological innovations and the resulting social problems that are caused by this lag. So, advancement in material culture creates moral and ethical issues. Okay, cultural lag can also be a result of this exchange in cultures that we are experiencing right now. So, for example, technology advances at a rapid rate, but society by nature tends to resist change. So, take for example the current situation in education right now. Computer technology is so advanced already, there is a shift in how to conduct classes, but people are resistant. Okay, so you can ask me later on my views on academic freeze. Another example is stem cell research and therapies. Stem cell is, if I remember it right, is katong you preserve the you know that when you mothers give birth, kanang ay merg belly button that's attached kanang the cord umbilical cord. Okay, they preserve the umbilical cord, and it was because it was proven to defeat a host of diseases. So they yet, unfortunately, they have to come from unborn fetuses. So some types of abortion remain legal on several state and federal levels, creating a conflict between medical advancement, the law, and ethical and religious beliefs. I don't know if you have seen that video in Brazil. Brazil actually just recently legalized abortion. However, people were very resistant to it. Okay, Brazil is highly Catholic. And then there was this kid who got pregnant because she was raped. She was 10 years old. The court now allowed her to have an abortion. Imagine the trauma that she was in because she was repeatedly raped at 10 years old. She got pregnant, and then on her way to the hospital to get an abortion, people were protesting against her abortion, calling her names. 'Di ba? In our culture, or in our minds, now we might say nga, it's unfair. It was she was too young to be raped. She did not want it, and yet people are calling her name. So it was like a double trauma for her. Okay, now because of this kind of meetings of different cultures, we now have what we call cultural diversity. I'm sure the term is very, very, very much. obvious. Is that what it is? So according to Cluckhan and Murray in 1953, we are like all other species, like some other persons, like no other persons. Let us break that down. First is the cultural universality. So we are like all others, something that exists in every culture. So what are those? We have all cultures have religion. Whether you identify as an atheist or not, that is still a religion. Rules and norms, leadership, and music. But of course, all countries have music. They all have governments. But when you say like some other, it is a cultural generality. So cultural pattern or trait that exists in some, but not all societies. For example, Christianity and chopsticks. This is just a few. Not all countries in the world are Christians, and not everybody uses chopsticks. And of course, like no other, it's a cultural particularity. So it is a distinctive or unique cultural pattern or trait. Levels of culture, we have international, national, subcultures, and countercultures. So international culture are the cultural traditions that extend beyond national boundaries. We have, I don't know who those guys are, but basketball. Diba? I would remember the time when if it's NBA season, students, faculty, and staff would flock to two areas, to two buildings here in campus, in the student center and in the cafeteria because both have TVs, and they would just watch. And of course, the burger, right? So it's an international culture. National culture are cultural features shared by the citizens of the same country, Filipino. Ang Pilipino, kahit saan nyo po ilagay, nagsusugal yan. And of course, adobo. Diba? So in subculture, different cultural traditions associated with subgroups in the same complex society. For example, speaking Cebuano. And counterculture. So there was a time when LGBT was considered to be a counterculture, but now they're very much accepted in society, so they're now considered to be a subculture. After this, I will be showing to you because I love to doodle, I want to doodle. I'm going to show you to you how counterculture and culture differs.
Explaining counterculture and subculture can be presented using a pizza. A pizza can be divided into different slices, right? So let's just have 4 slices. Okay, in the first part, let's have pepperoni. Pepperoni slices, and then what else do we add to pepperoni? Let's put in cheese. Right? And in the next slide, let's have what do you want, guys? Fish or sardines? Diba? Tibuok isda ang nasa. That is one culture. And then let's have, what else do we have? Let's have vegetarian. So let's have grass here. And let's have another one. What do we have? Let's put in junk food. So Cheerios. Right? Okay. So culture, the entire pizza is what we call, represents culture in your society. The different slices here is what we call subculture. Now, how do we represent counterculture? When you choose a pizza, what usually is the sauce? Tomato sauce, right? So what if we use vinegar. What should I use? Okay, see here. A vinegar sauce. And then we put in, what else? Fish sauce. And then what else do we put in? We soak our pizza in seawater. Okay. So countercultures, these cultures are actually something that goes against the cultures. Okay. Before, LGBT was considered to be a counter culture. But since social change happened, LGBT now became a subculture. That's all. Thank you.
So, based on the discussion, how does politics fit in this change in society? Politics, guys, is actually one of the mechanisms on social and cultural change. Why? Because people tend to want to be in power to be able to make changes. Let's just put there hit an example. Our President Duterte, when he came into power as a president, he wanted to change the form of government from unitary to federal government. So if there's a difference between the two in the unitary. In the unitary, all taxes from the provinces will go to the central government, and what is returned to the provinces is only a portion of it. Whereas in federalism, whereas in federalism, a portion of the total taxes in the province is what's going to be sent to the central government, and the majority will be left in the federal state, in the state of Visayas or state of Negros. Okay, that depends, diba? So he wanted to be president in order to be able to do just that. But unfortunately, with this term ending, I don't think federalism is going to happen anytime soon. Wala siya. And also, for example, what if we have a president who is pro LGBT, 'di ba? He maybe the president would actually create a law that would allow same-sex marriage. So if same-sex marriage becomes a legal thing here in the Philippines, our state of family or the arrangement as a family will also change, right? So that is the role of politics in social cultural change.